My name is Amanda Wick, and I am the curator of the Charles Babbage Institute Archives. On behalf of the First Fridays Committee and the Archives and Special Collections Department, welcome to First Fridays. This season's theme is sensory experiences. We are exploring the things you can see, hear, touch, taste, or smell in archives and special collections. First Fridays is a monthly series of presentations made possible by a generous gift from Governor Elmer L. Andersen and Mrs. Eleanor Andersen in honor of former library director Dr. Edward B. Stanford. The presentations are based on materials in the University Library's archives and special collections. A special thank you to the interpreters from Middle English who will be providing ASL interpretation for today's presentation. If time allows, we will have a Q&A at the end of the two presentations. If Zoom audience members have any questions for our speakers today, please submit them using the Q&A function and not the chat so that we can keep track of questions. In-person audience, please hold your questions till the end. And there will be a tour after the presentation with Lisa Von Drasik, who is sitting in the back of the room over there. We're going to pause very quickly for the land acknowledgement. The University of Minnesota Twin Cities is built within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. It is important to acknowledge the peoples on whose land we live, learn, and work as we seek to improve and strengthen our relations with tribal nations. We also acknowledge that words are not enough. We must ensure that our institution provides support, resources, and programs that increase access to all aspects of higher education for American Indian students, staff, faculty, and community. Our presentations today feature the Charles Babbage Institute's Dr. Maureen A. Nappy Collection Processing Project and the Andersen Horticultural Library. The first presentation is Social Change and Experiential Art, the Maureen A. Nappy Papers. It's presented by my colleague, Jennifer Shaw Spence, who is the Maureen A. Nappy Project Archivist within the Charles Babbage Institute Archives. Dr. Maureen Nappy was an activist and artist who utilized computer graphics and design to produce thought-provoking multisensory works invoking the cultural zeitgeist and social movements of the 1980s and 90s, with a specific focus on the relationship between humanity and technology, feminism, and racial violence. Join us for an experiential introduction and deep dive into Dr. Nappy's work and activism. Our second presentation is a sensory walk through the forest, discovering the Andersen Horticultural Library, presented by Kristen Mastel, who is the head librarian and curator of the Andersen Horticultural Library. In this presentation, we will embark on a sensory-rich journey through the Andersen Horticultural Library's collections, where nature, literature, and lived experience intertwine. This immersive presentation invites participants to explore the five senses: sight, sound, touch, taste, and smell, through the library's unique holdings and experiential learning. Guided by Kristen Mastel, librarian and certified forest bathing guide, we'll discover how sensory awareness deepens our connection to the natural world. Kristen will weave her experience leading forest bathing sessions on campus throughout the presentation. I'll introduce Jenny now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jennifer Shaw Spence. I am the project archivist for the Maureen Nappy Papers at the Charles Babbage Institute Archives. Dr. Maureen Nappy has been called an artist, an activist, educator, theorist, and graphics pioneer. In her work, she focused on entertainment, gender politics, housing, and race inequality, spiritualism, environmentalism, and the convergence of humans and technology. This roster is far too long to cover in a 30-minute presentation today, so I'll be focusing on her work as a feminist and advocate for the computer arts as a retrospective through the lens of music and visual arts. Is that better? Okay. Maureen Nappy was born in 1951 into a Catholic Italian-American family in Pennsylvania. Interested in art from an early age, she reported that she began drawing at age 4. And at age 14, she won a citywide award for sculpture. She attended art classes at a local public school while simultaneously attending a local Catholic all-girls high school. She graduated from high school in 1969 and earned a scholarship and began studying at the Philadelphia Moore College of Art with a focus in fine art. Around this time, Maureen got involved with the feminist movement and became a member of the organization, the Philadelphia Women's Liberation, in 1970. She also wrote and illustrated for Through the Looking Glass, a feminist magazine published out of Philadelphia. Nappy left Moore College to pursue her interest in a format beyond the classical arts, photography, and more importantly, film. In an interview with her former intern, Eugene Lowe, in 1987, Nappy discussed how a design class piqued her interest in moving pictures. I got really interested in seeing the still images I was drawing and animating them, she told Lowe. She left school and pursued art and filmmaking independently. In 1971, she moved to New Haven, Connecticut and co-founded a women-owned and run house painting company. She joined the New Haven Women's Liberation Movement and ran the Women's Center at Yale University full-time from 1972 to 1973, all while she was photographing and filming. In 1974, Maureen moved to New York City and returned to her education. She enrolled in the University of New York Institute of Film and Television through the Tisch School of Arts. And while attending Tisch University, Maureen Nappy took a class on computer-assisted design. The class covered ArtSpeak, a computer program using punch cards was her first introduction to a new artistic tool. Maureen produced several independent films during her time at Tisch. Her early films, What is an Early Abortion, which she directed for writer Rika Albert, Women's Basketball 1975, and The Clit Tapes all focus on women's socio-political topics, but her work was not always well received. Her film, The Clit Tapes, was accused of being pornographic and pulled from an art show by the gallery owners. Her response was later published in Heresies, a feminist publication, and detailed the exchange. Ms. Nappy also curated the first New York University Video Film Festival before graduating in 1976. She immediately enrolled for her master's in cinema studies. She stayed in New York City after presenting her thesis on public access television in New York City and mingled at the New York art scene, where she participated in the No Wave arts exhibitions at Arlene Schloss's Wednesdays at A's, Through the Kitchen, an avant-garde performance and experimental art space, with Topless TV in 1979. And in 1980, she curated the Women's One World video exhibition, during which she shared some selected works. Ms. Nappy was hired by a video music lounge called Hurrah in 1980, before she was brought on as the new video director under the Pop Network for the Peppermint Lounge, a historic music venue in New York City. The venue had recently been sold and reopened, and Maureen Nappy supervised and co-designed the new closed-circuit video installation with 16 monitors. She organized the artist nights where local video artists could show their work. The Pop Network predated the existence of MTV, but was distributing music videos to venues. Ms. Nappy and her team of videographers at the Peppermint Lounge, who were responsible for filming the live performances of notable bands and musicians, including Black Flag, The Go-Go's, Waitress, Philip Glass, Tito Puente, and Grandmaster Flash, all of which are represented in the collection, among with others. This position created new networking opportunities, which served her immediate career and future artistic goals. This introduction to music videos resulted in a meteoric career path. In just over 5 years, Maureen Nappy held 8 positions, including producer and director, engineer, art technician, graphic designer, art director, director of computer graphics. And in order, she held these positions at the Pop Network, the Satellite News Channel, MTV Network, VCA Teletronics, and finally, in 1985, she opened her own business, Maureen Nappy Incorporated. Her work-life balance during this era would make hustle culture kids itch, and at some points, she was working 2 jobs simultaneously, and coworkers described her as regularly pulling all-nighters. One possibly satirical document, a former supervisor admitted that she was hired because she would do anything, including fixing a sink and making the team sandwiches. Maureen had previously worked under her own title, Maureen's Life, for her independent work. Under Maureen Nappy Incorporated, Maureen brought on her most famous role, or at least her most recognizable, the original Max Talking Headroom show, for which she designed the graphics and openers for the 6-show series on HBO. Her signature geometric forms and moving shapes created the atmosphere for the show and set the tone. She also worked with A&E Network, CNBC, American Museum of Natural History, Science Bulletin, Yoko Ono, and on several projects, among others. Stepping away from Maureen Nappy's history, let's take a moment to cover the dramatic shift in both Maureen's style and the changing technology of film during the 1980s. Maureen Nappy was at the forefront of the shift in digital art, and her experience with the music industry left a mark on her work. In a few moments, I will be showing 3 short clips from her portfolio. I had planned to go for a little bit longer, but let's move on. Better? Okay. The first clip is from a film called See, a compilation from the 1980s with digital, filmed, and stop-motion elements produced by Maureen Nappy. This film includes photographs of Maureen Nappy and her family and friends. These images are interspersed with drawings of a female torso breathing, paper-cut woman, and drawings of facial features and computer-generated squiggles. And the second From 2 years later in 1982, Maureen Nappy created Beat Plus One, and here the style has shifted away from the elements drawn on paper and then photographed to a born digital style. These elements are still hand-drawn, but now the items are created on the computer, probably using the Images Paint 2 system, for which she wrote a manual used by the New York Institute of Technology the same year. Here you will see Maureen Nappy's particular style in the woman who occasionally flashes on the screen, as well as more abstract images. Should also note that she used music from somebody that she met in her music video days, Liquid Liquid. Okay, sorry about that. The third clip is a bit different for several reasons. Continuum 1, Initiation. Maureen Nappy worked with a partner for this film named Dean Winkler. This film was established in 1989 and uses more advanced technology, including 3D elements. These 3D elements were produced by laying a two-dimensional image over a three-dimensional mesh plane called a vector. This vector could be stretched and manipulated. The subject matter centers on classical spiritual iconography and original abstract 3D elements. The music was again provided by an old acquaintance, Philip Glass, back from the Wednesday at A's and Pop Network days of the 1980s. This film earned Maureen Nappy and Dean Winkler no less than 4 awards internationally. As the technology of the age advanced, Maureen Nappy was developing new skills and refining her art. Her art demonstrated the technological shift from hand-drawn and uploaded to digital-born three-dimensional effects within 1 decade. Her subject matter shifted from tangible and physical to more abstract, to emotional and metaphysical. While not something specifically addressed in most of the papers and articles, especially from the 1980s and 90s, they held a tone that Maureen and the other computer artists and video artists interviewed needed to defend their media as a legitimate art form on a regular basis. In this 1988 State of the Artist issue of Scanlines, in which Miss Nappy and other artists expressed frustration. In all, the designer's role in the process is often misunderstood and the talent overlooked, while attention is focused on the miraculous machinery. In her PhD dissertation entitled Language, Memory, and Volition, Maureen Nappy, now Dr. Maureen Nappy, states that naming the artwork created through the use of computer as computer-generated has developed into quite a substantial linguistic inaccuracy as well as a misunderstanding in the larger context. This incorrectly credits the computer and not the artist as the generator of the artwork, while the implication that the computer has more substantial creative role in the artwork than in fact it really does. Maureen Nappy was credited by the New York Foundation for the Arts Council as being one of the driving forces behind the creation of the computer arts as an NYFA Artists Fellowship category, which was first awarded in 1996. It was the first computer arts discipline category within an arts funding organization in the United States. In a critical essay for the NYFA titled Metaforms in 2001, she says the computer arts form a practice in which artists actively engage and appropriate technology and through their creative endeavors infuse it with their own visions. She notes in this same essay that artists already in the 1950s were using early computer systems for artistic purposes, but pointed out that this art was often made in the off hours and that sometimes it was created in inhospitable environments. 50 years later, Maureen Nappy was still defending computer arts as a legitimate art form, but now with the backing of the New York Foundation for the Arts and the financial statistics to support her. In Aesthetic Intention, Technology, and the Art Praxis, published in 1995, Maureen Nappy discusses the context of what is now considered art. For example, cave paintings and portraiture was not considered art when it was first created. Context for cave paintings is only speculative, and portraiture was the equivalent of commercial art. Essentially, context matters. Maureen Nappy wrote that as a feminist, it has been required of me to be conscious, conversant, and dynamic within the social and artistic context of the world in which I live. To that end, I have created works that respond to the world around me with the hope of making a contribution not previously made. But her work was not always warmly received. She argues further that the language is required to understand and that the language to describe new technologies often lags behind the changing technologies themselves. In Aesthetic Intention, Technology and the Art Praxis, 1995, and Embryonic Scan for Aesthetic Parameters of Technological Means, 1997, Maureen Nappy discusses the need for a language or framework that allows computer artists and critics a clearer way to define the process creation, delivery, and aesthetics of computer art in the transference of artist-creator to the art, to the interpretation by the viewer recipient of the final art object. Someone should probably get on that, huh? So in 2002, Maureen Nappy presented her PhD dissertation as an American Association of University Women doctoral fellow, and did just that, defending what Maureen Nappy had identified as the technological parameters for this discourse around the aesthetics of computer arts as a discipline: language, memory, and volition. She also came to the conclusion that computers cannot be considered the medium as defined by Marshall McLuhan's "The Medium is the Message" from his text Understanding Media. This was a formative idea for Maureen in her early career, but by the time computers as a format were no longer able to function by this time, computers as a format were no longer able to function as the medium because they were too complex. Rather, she identifies the computer as a meta tool and meta medium. Keep in mind that during her tenure as a computer artist, the technology had shifted from punch cards to microprocessors to chips. She had seen the rise of personal computers, email, and the World Wide Web. Artists had shifted away from ArtSpeak and the Quintel Paintbox, and now in 2002, Adobe Photoshop and Blender could be installed on a personal computer. Disseminating art has changed drastically with the introduction of email and personal websites, and for larger data sets, CD-ROMs are now the preferred form of storage for personal use, and they are so small they can be sent through the mail. What started as something akin to a dictation device or a graphing calculator has morphed into something that manages communication, dissemination, creation, and consumption. Maureen Nappy worked for 30 years as an instructor at Long Island University, teaching critical studies and studio art at the graduate and undergraduate levels, before retiring as professor of media theory in 2021. Her dedication to forwarding computer arts continued to go beyond the classroom as she presented and exhibited regularly at symposiums and conferences nationally and internationally, in New York, Philadelphia, Montreal, Canada, Barcelona, Spain, Hiroshima, Japan, Monte Carlo, Monaco, and London, England. Later in her career, she would begin to write prolifically on the subject of computer arts and sciences intersecting with feminism and women's work. In 2011, Dr. Nappy presented her paper, Women Plus Media, at the United Nations 55th Commission on the Status of Women during a panel for engendering technologies. In 2015, she wrote 2 articles on early proto-cyber feminists, Lillian Schwartz and Shulamith Firestone. She was awarded the Keeper of the Flame Award by the National Women's Hall of Fame and was an active member of the Veteran Feminists of America. In 2006, she was also included in a retrospective, Feminists Who Changed America from 1963 to 1975 by Barbara J. Love. Maureen Nappy identified together and at different times as an artist, an academic, a theorist, an advocate, but never that I have found as a technologist. I wonder as her archivist if she chose to donate to CBI, not to an archive dedicated to the arts because of early acceptance as a technology specialist and a pioneer, even though her field of study continues to be male-dominated. What I do know is that CBI holds a close relationship with the ACM's Special Interest Group in Graphics. Maureen Nappy was a longtime member of the SIG-Graph organization and was a member of the Computer Graphics Pioneers and served as a course reviewer for the conference course selection committee as well as a moderator and panelist. She was recognized in 2023 in memoriam by the organization for her commitment to the field. It is likely that her relationship drew her to the CBI archive, to which she left her papers as well as her film materials. During her long but extremely prolific career, Maureen Nappy saw the rise and fall of some of the most foundational technologies, from punch cards to algorithmic generative art. This project is about halfway through and has identified over 780 digital and magnetic artifacts ready for digitization, including early footage from the Pop Network, masters of the original Max Talking Headroom show, and footage from her independent films spanning 4 decades. Her papers cover her work, education, teaching, writing, and artistic endeavors. The Charles Babbage Institute would like to express its gratitude to Dr. Maureen Nappy for her generous gift of her materials, but also her financial support, which not only funded the processing and digitization of this collection, but will be used in the future to further the visibility of the other female technology pioneers in order to honor her legacy. Thank you all.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you all. I'm just kind of curious. I'm Kristen Mastel. I'm from the other Andersen Horticultural Library. How many of you have been out to the Arboretum, to our library? Okay, open invitation to all of you who haven't made it out that way. It is about a 40-minute drive from here. So I'm going to take you on a little sensory journey through our library and through my work. And with that, sometimes the forest becomes the classroom, the moment that we decide to really look closely. Forest therapy and botanical illustration, there we go, may seem like different worlds, one rooted in mindful practice and the other in artistic expression, yet both begin at the same simple, powerful act: noticing. Forest therapy invites us to slow down and sense the world around us, while botanical illustration asks us to observe nature with enough care that every line that we see is honored. Together, they remind us that attention is the form of connection, and what we look at closely, nature reveals far more than we may expect. My own journey with forest therapy began at my time here at the University of Minnesota, where I served as the outreach and instruction librarian at McGraw Library on the St. Paul campus. There, I introduced forest therapy as a way for students, staff, and faculty to step away from the academic pressures and to reconnect with the natural world, and in doing so, reconnect with themselves. We started with a simple offering, quickly revealed its power. Participants consistently describe feeling calmer, clearer, and more grounded, even after brief 30-minute sessions. Since then, I've been fortunate to integrate forest therapy across a wide range of disciplines, everything from art and East Asian studies to public health, architecture, landscape architecture, and beyond. No matter the field, nature proves to be the ultimate teacher, offering perspective, creativity, and a sense of belonging that enriches every area of study. So I'm just kind of curious if you could take a moment and just sense where you are right now. How are you feeling today? From maybe 1, low stress, to 10, high stress, where's the room today? So I'd love to see with your hands, audience participation, where are we today? I'm like a 4 to 8 because I'm up here. Okay, kind of middle from lows to a little higher. Okay, Great, thank you. So the practice of forest therapy derives from the translation of Shinrin-yoku in Japanese, or bathing one's senses in nature. It began in Japan in the 1980s as a public health initiative when researchers noticed rising stress levels and increased rates of disease and burnout. They discovered spending time in the forest had measurable positive effects on both the body and the mind. Since then, forest therapy has spread worldwide and is now practiced in healthcare settings, universities, wellness programs, and community groups. However, it can be done anywhere. For example, even in the desert, when I visited the Desert Botanic Garden in Phoenix. Sorry, there are no clawfoot tubs on Northrop Mall here, but rather forest bathing or forest therapy is a slow, intentional walk around campus. At its core, forest therapy is about slowing down and shifting from doing to being. Instead of rushing through nature, we let nature come to us. We pay attention to the sound of leaves, the texture of bark, the scent of pine, and the movement of light. It's not a hike, it's not a workout, it's an invitation to notice. Forest therapy works through a combination of sensory engagement, mindfulness, and biological responses triggered by the natural environment. Forests stimulate all 5 of our senses in gentle, non-overwhelming ways. The sound of the wind or migrating birds, the smell of soil and leaves, the sight of natural patterns and colors, the feeling of cool air or textured bark. This sensory input helps calm the nervous system and anchors us in the present moment. And trees release natural compounds called phytoncides, which are used to protect themselves from insects and disease. And humans benefit from them too. Exposure to phytoncides have been shown to increase immune function and reduce stress hormones. Forest therapy encourages a mindful state without forcing it, and nature naturally slows our thoughts and reduces mental chatter, making it easier to feel grounded and centered. The benefits of forest therapy are wide-ranging and supporting by a growing body of research, including research done here at the University of Minnesota. Studies consistently show that time spent in forests lowers cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. People often report feeling calmer, lighter, and more emotionally balanced even after a short session. Nature restores attention. When we step away from the screens and constant stimulation, the brain gets a chance to reset. This leads to clearer thinking, better concentration, and improved creativity. And forest therapy has been linked to even improving our health and wellness by fighting infections and even some cancers by activating our natural killer cells. And these immune benefits can last for days after a forest therapy session. And the forest environment also helps lower our blood pressure and heart rate, supporting long-term heart health. Forest therapy fosters connection also on multiple levels. Connection to nature, connection to oneself, and connection to others when we participate in a group. So this sense of belonging is a powerful antidote to loneliness and disconnection that's really abundant today in the digital world. There's no right or wrong way to ever participate in a forest bathing session. The forest is the teacher, and the guide simply opens the door. So I always like to include a sensory activity when I present. And on the end of each aisle, there is a little bough of pine. So on one end of the rows. So I think over here and over there. So I would encourage you to maybe break off a bundle from our conifer friend here. So bonus points. Can anyone identify this conifer? Oh, oh, ding, ding, ding. I think I heard red pine. Yes, so I encourage folks to just break off a little bundle or two or three and then pass it down the row. So everyone in your group will have a few little bundles to play with. Bonus if you get a pine cone. So I'm also a naturalist, so an easy way to identify red pine is the bundles of two. Really long needles. A jack pine also has bundles of two. If you find a pine that has a bundle of five, remember the word white also has 5 letters. So a white pine, the bundles will be 5 needles. So with that, we will have a little sensory experience and pretend we're going to go on a little walk. So we're going to watch a little nature video here for a couple moments. When we walk, we are using our primary sense of sight. So I might encourage you to notice things that are close, things that are in the middle distance, and things that are far. Visual environment at those 2 levels. I'd like you to tune into a sense of hearing. You're able. Maybe tune into what you can hear in the distance, that middle space, and really close by. That could even be your rumbling. Might notice a little pine needle. Different parts of the leaves here feel. Sense of taste and smell are interconnected, and we had a wonderful lunch from Holy Land. Yeah. But you might lift your pine nut and see what aromas come up. You could try bending it, breaking it. If you're really adventurous, you could even nibble on it. But my other tip is you're welcome to take a bundle home and you can put them in some hot water. The little pine. All right. So how did that feel? Oh, I like that sound. What did we notice? Audience participation. What are a few things people noticed? Oh, crunching, also cars, colors, Something white in the background. Wind,
One point.
maybe water.
Season.
Season. Excellent. Thank you.
Or that.
So now, think back. Where are you now? If you had to rate your stress. All right, I'm down. I'm down a little. I'm down to maybe a 6. I'm still up here. So as we move from forest therapy into a world of botanical illustration, the thread that connects them becomes clear. Both ask us to slow down and truly see. Forest therapy opens our senses to the living landscape, inviting us to notice textures, colors, patterns, and quiet details that we often overlook. Botanical illustration takes the same attentive presence and channels it into art, transforming observation into understanding. In many ways, illustration becomes an extension of the forest therapy mindset, a way of continuing to listen to nature, but now with a pen or brush in hand. So I'd like to next take you on a journey through 2 pivotal moments in the history of botanical illustration. Moments shaped by 2 remarkable figures. Pietro Andrea Mattioli in the 16th century and Aylmer Burke Lambert in the 19th century. These 2 men lived nearly 250 years apart, yet each transformed how plants, especially conifers, were depicted, studied, and understood. Their work marks the shift from early, often crude woodcuts to some of the most exquisite botanical images ever produced. So let's begin in the mid-1500s, when printing was still a relatively young technology. An herbal is a reference book describing plants and their medicinal, culinary, or aromatic uses. 16th and 17th century herbals reflect a growing global exchange of botanical knowledge, with explorers introducing new specimens across Europe and the Americas. However, many images were repeatedly copied from earlier manuscripts and becoming so degraded that over time they were often unreliable for plant identification. Then came Mattioli, a physician and naturalist whose commentary on Dioscorides became one of the most influential botanical works of the Renaissance. Mattioli's illustrations, first appearing in 1554, were some of the finest woodblock images of conifers of this time. His woodcuts were carved by 2 highly skilled artists, Giorgio Liberale and Wolfgang Meyerpeck, whose craftsmanship far surpassed that of most Northern European woodblock carvers. Their work introduced greater detail and depth than earlier woodcuts and more accurate botanical features. A new visual vocabulary for describing trees, which had previously been awkwardly rendered. Mattioli may have drawn the originals himself. He never credited an artist, but whether or not he held the pen, he certainly held the vision. Before Mattioli, woodcuts struggled to balance 2 competing goals, showing the overall habitat of a tree and showing enlarged details like leaves and cones. Trying to do both on a single woodblock often produced images that looked wildly out of scale. Mattioli's team solved this problem with more sophisticated carving, deeper and shallower lines, and a more confident sense of composition. His illustrations became so admired that they were copied, sometimes poorly, across Europe. Northern printers often avoided his most complex images because their carvers simply couldn't match the skill required. In short, Mattioli set a new standard. He showed what woodcuts could be, and he paved the path for the next great leap in botanical illustration. Now let's jump forward to the early 1800s, a time when engraving and lithography had opened new possibilities for botanical art. Lithography is a printing method where an artist draws on a flat surface using grease, and the image prints because oil and water repel each other. Unlike woodcuts, which are carved into wood and printed from raised areas, lithography does not require carving. Therefore, more natural, detailed drawings appear. Enter Lambert, an English botanist whose monumental work, A Description of the Genus Pinus, is widely regarded as the greatest conifer book ever produced. Lambert's publication history is famously complex. Multiple editions, inconsistent plate numbering, and copies that vary widely depending on what sheets were available at the time. But beneath this bibliographic chaos lies a masterpiece. The illustrations were created primarily by Ferdinand Bauer, one of the most gifted botanical artists in history. Bauer's precision was legendary. He used a color coding system that allowed him to reproduce exact hues long after observing a specimen. Lambert's volumes include large, exquisitely detailed engravings, accurate depictions of cones, needles, and growth habits. It's the first comprehensive visual record of many conifers newly introduced to Europe. These are not just illustrations, they're scientific tools created at a moment when explorers like David Douglas were bringing back species that Europeans had never seen before. Lambert's work arrived at a turning point in botanical science. Linnaean taxonomy had reshaped plant classification, and new species were flooding into European markets and gardens. His genus Pinus attempted to bring order to this expanding world, and Ferdinand Bauer closely followed the Linnaean classification system, which organized plants based on their reproductive structures. To support this system, Bauer carefully illustrated flowering parts of plants, such as stamen and pistils, cones, and ovules, often isolating and magnifying them from their forms so they could be clearly compared and studied, which you'll see on the bottom part of each image. His precise drawings helped translate the Linnaean taxonomy into clear visual language. Even with its quirks, multiple editions, inconsistent plates, and the occasional taxonomic confusion, Lambert's work still remains a cornerstone of conifer literature. It represents a moment when botanical illustration reached a level of detail and accuracy that could rival and sometimes surpass photography. Does anyone see something wrong in these pictures? Little pop quiz. So on the left, Pinus albus is actually a spruce. So it's not within the genus Pinus. Spruce trees are in genus Pisceae. So just note that one is incorrect. Together, Mattioli and Lambert illustrate the evolution of botanical illustration from the limitations of early woodcuts to the heights of engraved artistry. Mattioli showed what is possible within the constraints of the woodblock, elevating botanical images to new levels of clarity and detail, while Lambert, with Bauer's incomparable artistry create a visual encyclopedia of conifers that remains unmatched in scope and beauty. Their work reminds us that botanical illustration is not merely decorative. It is a scientific language, a historical record, and an art form that continues to inspire. So thank you for joining me on this journey through the art of noticing. Take time to observe your red pine needles at home and perhaps try a quick sketch or two. You don't have to be the next Ferdinand Bauer to put your pencil to the page. I'm certainly not. Drawing at any skill level helps you slow down and quietly observe the tiny details of our natural world around you. Thank you.
Where was the video?
So now is time for questions. If Jennifer, if you want to come on up too. Question was, where was the video taken? I did not take that video. I don't know if you caught it or not, but there is a Wisconsin State Park sign hidden in there. So sorry, I tried really hard to find a nice Minnesota one, but I need to record one, I guess. The Andersen Horticultural Library is at the Arboretum, so Minnesota Landscape Arboretum in Chaska. We're in the historic Snyder Building part.
Sure, there it's incredible.
No, Amanda, do you wanna? The question was, how did the nappy papers arrive here? And it's a little bit of an adventure. I'm gonna let Amanda take that.
So it is an adventure, actually. The Marine Day nappy papers came to us because we have a really tight relationship with the Association for Computing Machinery, and specifically the Special Interest Group in Computer Graphics, who Jennifer mentioned, the SIGGRAPH group. We have some just amazing champions of the Charles Babbage Institute in that group. They definitely evangelize for us, and I know a few of them actually have a copy of our deed of gift that they hand out to people. So I assume that that is how Marine actually heard about us. The story of how everything actually came to us, though, is interesting because as a curator, I didn't have the opportunity to engage directly with Marine. I received kind of an out of the blue message that wound its way actually through the entire University of Minnesota libraries, from someone named Claire Goodman, that started with just like a chat to somebody in the libraries of, I'm trying to find the Charles Babbage Institute. And it kind of, wound its way around. And finally, 2 days later, I got this email saying, you need to talk to this person. So I reached out. Claire is the executor of the Dr. Marine A. Nappy estate. She died very suddenly. And when she passed, she made Claire the executor and wanted to have her materials donated to the Charles Babbage Institute here at the University of Minnesota. Claire had never heard of us. So she was a little bit in the dark about how to go about that. So we built a relationship with Claire. Learning about Marine has just been a real pleasure for me as a curator. As Jennifer mentioned, the donation of the material, which is extraordinary in and of itself, came with a very, very generous financial donation that will not just fund the digitization of this project, but also the digitization of almost every single woman in computing that we have in our archives. So yes, it is a truly transformational gift. And she also used part of the estate to go to the College of Liberal Arts, where they have created a research fellowship that is funded by the Nappy estate. So, I mean, truly the University of Minnesota has been just a huge beneficiary from the estates, and we are over the moon to have these materials in our archives.
Yeah.
One, two,
Oh, stress from a 522.
campuses.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Oh, no, now I have to share my hidden spots on campus where I like to go for forest bathing. Okay, so we have the river that separates East and West Bank, so I often bring students there. Since I was on the St. Paul campus, the little hidden gem, especially winter months, is the College of Biological Sciences does have a little conservatory there within the plant growth facility. So I love to sneak away into there, or the Master Gardener Trial Gardens. And then also behind McNeil Hall, there's a little fountain that is a little zen of quiet back there. And then, well, now I'm at the Arboretum with 1,200 acres that I can explore, which is lovely. So. Are there opportunities at the Arboretum for forest bathing, forest therapy walks? Yes, the Arboretum does offer forest bathing walks. My colleague, David Matzenberger, I believe is how you say his last name, is the guide for that. There is a charge for that. I offer sessions for faculty, staff, students free of charge when it's incorporated into faculty, staff, student well-being or courses. I also do them at the Arboretum if it's forest bathing, you plus your dog, because we have the dog commons there. So I will be the guide at those, but otherwise check out your local continuing education, your local parks. There's actually probably about half a dozen of us guides around the Twin Cities now. So just check it out. And there's lots of opportunities around the Twin Cities. Now that you've heard the term forest bathing, you'll probably see it pop up more and more.
Green and blue?
Jennifer, I wondered if you could sort of reflect and expand on your experience of having to interact with so many different generations of computer or digital technology and maintaining the equipment to even be able to read and get access to that information.
Sure. So of the 780 objects we have, a majority of those have existed from before I was born. So it has been kind of an interesting deep dive into what media existed. We have DC cassettes, which are 18 inches wide, about 1.5 inches thick, and about 10 inches tall. Those were probably the largest. But most of these materials, because they are so fragile, magnetic media tends to be a little lossy and delicate. So we are actually going to be working with a second-party vendor for a majority of those. About 150 items are going to be able to stay here, and I have the opportunity to work with Laura Friedman-Shedlov, who has been kind of guiding me through the digitization of these newer media, 3.5-inch floppies, CDs, hard drives.
I think we have time for one more question. So are there any last in the back?
Relate to the Andersen, the Arboretum Library. But I've been told that the old farm magazines are all up there. They're not on the St. Paul campus. Like the ones that in the turning century.
Yeah, so one of our collections of distinction out at Andersen Horticultural Library are old seed catalogs. We're actually the third largest in North America, possibly the world, with over 80,000 items in our collection now. So those are viewable by appointment. We also do have old periodicals and magazines too, but I'm guessing you were referring to the like good old like Burpee and other like seed catalogs? Nope. Oh, the farmer. Yes, like old periodicals and things we do.
Everything farmer got.
Yes, we do have some of those like trade magazines and journals. Yes. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Jennifer.